Hi guys, Dark Aperture here, and today I'm back with a $350 console killer gaming PC. Now this is a pretty budget build, but it'll still have enough power to run any of the latest games. Not the high settings, but it'll be able to run the latest games. And it's a good starting point for getting to PC gaming. So let's get to the parts list, and then we'll go to the actual build. In some ways, this actually has an advantage over the $400 build, but in some ways, it has a disadvantage over the $400 build. I just, I just got lucky here, then I guess. Now for the processor, I went with the AMD A8 5600K. Now this is a very powerful quad-core CPU, and just for a few more dollars than the A6 5400K, it has 2 extra cores, and it's a lot more powerful. It can also, I'd say its integrated is powerful enough to play games on 720p at medium settings and 1080p at low settings. There's no gain the CPU can handle. Granted, not not maxed, but the CPU can handle games at some point. So since it's an A8 5600K, it's very overclockable. So you'll need a Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo. This will allow a pretty good overclock on the APU. You should break 4 GHz easily. That'll make your games run a lot faster. And it's a pretty beast cooler for the price. Sure, it's huge, but you shouldn't worry too much about that. It's only $35 too, which I'd say is an excellent price for a cooler of this grade, especially since it can be competitive with far more expensive coolers. Now, for the RAM, we went with a G-Scale Ripjaws X DDR3 1866. We went with 4 gigs of it. And the reason we get fast RAM for this APU is the fact that the APU is integrated, has no memory. It runs off your system RAM. So you're gonna need fast RAM to run games really well. To run games really well when you're using an AMD APU. Also, 1866 RAM is just plain fast. Sure, you might want to upgrade to 8 gigs in the future, but that's not something you'll have to worry about for now. It's only $40 too, which is pretty solid price for such good RAM. Next up for the motherboard, we went with the ASRock FM2 A75M DGS. It's got USB 3, it's got SATA 6, and it's got a slot for 2 slots actually, so it could have a later graphics card upgrade, like putting a 6670 later to get additional performance. It's also very good in terms of quality, and it got good reviews. And it also has USB 3, that helps as well to have modern connectivity on your board. Considering you get all this for $60, that's pretty freaking good. Next up for the power supply, we cheaped out. No, just kidding. Never cheap out on the power supply. We went with the Corsair CX430. 430 watts is not a lot in enthusiast terms, but it's overkill for this build with only an APU. And it's also got enough room to put a 6670 in here and still keep your high overclocks you get. And it's also a very well built power supply. It's 80 plus bronze, and you always want to make sure your power supply is 80 plus certified. In particular, 80 plus bronze, because the power supply that isn't 80 plus, it's typically cheap, but it's typically awful. So, considering you get all this for $45, I'd say it's a pretty solid deal if you want quality power supply. If you cheap out on a power supply, you deserve every bit of problems you have with your computer in 6 months or so. Next up for the hard drive, it's a bit of a compromise. It's a 250GB Caviar Blue. This is a refurb model, which means warranties are a little sketchy. 250 gigs is not a lot, but it's okay, because you might just uninstall games when you're done them. Like you play through Crisis Free, you're done Crisis Free, you uninstall Crisis Free, and reinstall it later. It's also still a reliable 7200 RPM drive, even if it's a refurb, and it's a pretty solid deal for $35. It's the cheapest hard drive I could find that's not actually really cheaply built. But do you want to know what's cheaply built? The case in this build. The case is just some absolute cheap stuff. We have an Apex PC389C. Now I want to have the same direction of the $400 build, which had a good case, but at this price range, it just wasn't possible without sacrificing too much performance. It's a horrible case, but it'll hold everything in this build, and it's cheap. So it's $30. That's really good. Now, the total price for this build is $355 without the OS. With the OS, it's $455. But that's okay, because you can just install Linux. You may just have a Windows disk lying around. That's why I don't like including the OS in my builds, as many people already have a Windows install disk around. But I'll say right now, the total price for this build with the OS is $455 unless you use Linux, which is completely free. So, I hope you enjoyed this $350 build. Subscribe to me, Dark Aperture, if you liked it, and like this video too. Helps me out quite a bit. Goodbye, guys.